Hey everybody, welcome back to All Things Jamie. Today's video is going to be one that is very near and dear to my heart. It's our first Let's Talk Girls Talk, and it's about speaking up. And this video is where I'm going to share my VBAC after having 2 C-sections and how I believe that speaking up, of course with the grace of God, helped me to achieve a successful VBAC. So if this is something that you're interested in listening to, please keep watching the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and press that notification button. Okay guys, so in order for me to tell you about my successful VBAC after 2 C-sections, I feel like it's only fitting for me to tell you about my 2 C-sections. So my first C-section occurred after my water broke early in the morning. My water had been broken for 24 hours. One thing about me is that I'm very holistic, believe in very minimal care, especially when I'm pregnant. So I was seeing a midwife, had plans for a home birth. Again, my water broke, 24 hours of nothing, very little contractions, no cervical change. And with a home birth with a licensed midwife in the state of Florida at the time, you had only that amount of time, 24 hours, before you had to go. By law, the midwife had to transfer you to a hospital because at that point you were at higher risk. And so went to the hospital. They put me on oxytocin or Pitocin, which for those of you who don't know is supposed to make you have contractions and get labor started if it had not started. So I started contracting, and my cervix began to dilate, continued to dilate. I got all the way to 8 centimeters, and I had a vaginal exam or a cervical exam again, and the nurse said, oh my gosh, you went from 8 centimeters to 6 centimeters. And I was like, what? Now mind you, at the time I had just finished nursing school, but I had not practiced as a nurse yet in labor and delivery. And so I knew that sounded kind of odd just from the courses that we took in school, but I didn't have an extensive amount of knowledge base on the cervical exam. So anywho, after that, like I said, I turned my head and I asked to be checked again by the provider just to get a second opinion. And at this point I had been in labor for 48 hours at this point. It was like early in the morning, or around 6 o'clock. And let me just pause right there for a second. So when my midwife said that we needed to go to the hospital, I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to end up having a C-section. I'm going to end up having a C-section. And because that was something that I did not want to do, I know there are very few women who go into conception thinking, oh, I'll just, have a C-section. Most women want to have a vaginal delivery. Anywho, so I decided that I would make some little affirmations, things to put up around the room to just encourage me to stick to the things that I had wanted to do. So mind you, I wanted a natural home birth and ended up in the hospital on Pitocin. Those are like total opposites end of the spectrum. So anywho, back to when I asked the doctor if he would check me again, he pretty much blew me off and was like, no, it's just time. Let's just go ahead and have the C-section. And at this point, I was exhausted. Not just physically exhausted, I was emotionally tired from trying to fight. And this is no shade or anything to any of the people who were in the labor room at the time, and you guys know who you are. But it was a lot going on. My husband will tell you, we had so many people in the labor room, lots of family, and with that comes opinions. And so when you're dealing with other people's opinions and it's not necessarily the opinion, or it's not in line with what you want, sometimes that can be hard. And for me, that was hard emotionally. I was dealing with what the providers were saying, fighting against the negativity in my own mind, but still trying to fight for the things that I knew that I wanted, plus dealing with some of the comments and some of the things that other family members at the time thought that I should do. So I was just physically tired, emotionally tired of fighting at that point. And I, when he said, let's go ahead and do the C-section, and I asked to be checked again, and he does not check me. They literally rolled me out the room. And that was that. My firstborn, little Jeremiah, was born. And I literally did not get a chance to hold him for probably like 2.5 hours, because at that time he was born in Daytona. So they took me to the operating room. Then there was a separate recovery area where I went to recover, and I literally watched them bathe my baby. And I was told that I could not leave the recovery area until I could lift my legs. And so I was trying so hard to make from my brain to my legs to move so that I could get and hold my baby. I believe in exclusive breastfeeding for myself, and so I didn't want them to give him any formula. I wanted to, feed him. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to see him. There were so many things that I wanted. So anywho, that was that particular C-section. Moving forward, 9 months later, I found out I was pregnant again with my second baby. And so I fully went in with the mindset, okay, I know that VBACs, you can have them, there's not a lot of risk to them. I was healthy, gonna try for a VBAC. So I found another midwife, because we had relocated at the time, found another midwife who would, accept me having had a previous C-section. Got on board, was seeing her throughout the process, and then I ended up getting a kidney infection. And so with the midwife, she recommended that I go to the hospital because I was having extreme back pain. That's how we found out we had the kidney infection. Went there and was treated, and the provider there, I talked to him. He was kind of asking about like what were my labor plans, who was I planning on delivering with. I told him that it was going to be with a midwife, and literally in the room, he went out, and his partner ended up coming back in and trying to totally talk me out of trying to have a VBAC, and gave a ton of misinformation and actually started yelling at me to the point where my husband had to eventually make him leave the room. So that was my encounter with that provider. And so then the provider who was originally taking care of me came back like the next day, and he was like, I promise you, we'll totally let you VBAC, yada yada yada. And so he was like, just come to my practice, it's safer for you to VBAC at a hospital. Okay, chose him, transitioned my care, or transferred my care to this particular provider. Again, seeing him time and time again, he was talking about VBAC and how we're pro VBAC and yada yada yada. And probably when I was about 37 weeks, he was like, maybe we should just go ahead and schedule this C-section just in case you don't go into labor on your own. And that little thing in the back of my head went up, and I was like, yeah, ugh. I knew that I was going to have to fight hard. And so I was like, So anyways, once you get to like 36 weeks, they want to see you every week. And so every time I would go, he kept talking about scheduling me for a C-section. I was like, no, I don't want to schedule myself for a C-section. I want to try to have a vaginal delivery. Went to the hospital after I went into labor at 39 weeks and some days. And then lo and behold, went through labor. He actually ended up breaking my water without my consent. Continued to progress in labor. The baby's heart rate wasn't doing great at all. And honestly, I believe that part of that was because of him breaking my water, but that's another story. And he ended up having another C-section when I was 9 centimeters due to non-reassuring fetal heart tones. So that was that. That was my process in that C-section. And that again was after, laboring for hours, and, I had a bad epidural, had to get you know, the epidural wasn't even connected, so I wasn't getting the medicine all on the right side. It was just a mess. Anyway, so that was my second C-section. Now, after having those two experiences with the providers, before my husband and I decided to conceive again, I had made up in my mind that I was going to find a provider. I was going to use my resources and find someone who was genuinely VBAC friendly. And that wasn't just saying that because they wanted to acquire another patient, but that was genuinely interested in helping women to have their type of birth story, especially if it was considered low risk. And for those of you who don't know, even having a vaginal birth, that's what VBAC stands for, a vaginal birth after a C-section, after 2 C-sections, it can be the safest option for you depending on how your uterine scar is and other health issues. And so I knew that for me, that was the route that I wanted to go. So after much research, finding a provider that was accepted through my insurance, I found a provider, and I'm going to give a shout out to Full Circle Women's Care because they are amazing. They are located in Jacksonville, Florida. If you're looking for a provider, they are amazing, not just for VBACs, but they do soft C-sections, which is where you're actually able to see your baby while the C-section is there, not with this, you know, the cover that they have. They call them belly births, actually. Amazing, amazing, amazing practice. So anyways, I found them, talked to them, and what their process is that you have to do a consultation before they actually say, okay, we're going to go forth with, you know, accepting you as a patient to do a VBAC. And it's not just accepting you as a patient, but it's more so to say that it's safe to do a VBAC. So I had the consultation, everything went well. She got my history, got my information from my previous deliveries, and she was like, yeah, let's go for it. So, go through the pregnancy, all those great things. And at this point, I'm actually working as a labor and delivery nurse. So I'm seeing like all of these deliveries, been in a ton of C-sections, watching just how situations in the hospital can transpire, whether it's from the nurse who is tired of laboring the patient, is just like, let's just go ahead and get it over with, and calls the doctor and says, I don't think she's going to do it, and so they end up having a C-section. I have seen providers who are like looking at their watch, and because they have other things that they have to do, or it's late, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they've been there for an hour, and they're ready to go home and go to sleep, they will go in there into the patient and say, you know, it's time for us to have a C-section, even though it's not medically necessary. And so, you know, like I said, I've seen that. I also had other coworkers who, because of their fear of a vaginal birth after a C-section, were telling me their personal stories of that one patient that they had, one out of 25 years of working, who had a uterine rupture, and you know, trying to not scare me, but I guess give information about the things that can happen with a C-section, and just dealing with all those things. I went to my doctor and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to deal with the emotional stress of it. And so what she said, it's another moment of me where I appreciate having a provider who is really VBAC friendly. And just to throw in there, she actually had a successful VBAC herself, and so I think that helped with her understanding of the entire process. But anyway, she told me, she was like, Jamie, you know what, until your body tells me that you are not able to have a successful vaginal delivery, we're going to continue to move forward with the original plan of a VBAC. And when she said that, it was just like a weight lifted off my shoulder. I didn't feel like I was going to have to fight, because myself, my husband, and my provider, we were all on one accord. So we just went forth with the plan. Moving forward, I go into labor, and I was like, okay, I'm going to labor at home for as long as I can. And one of the perks of having working in a labor and delivery unit is that you have friends who know how to check your cervix. So I was was like, I had a really good friend, one of my coworkers. I was like, hey, I'm been, having some contractions and stuff. Can I come by and you check me? So she checked my cervix and she was like, Jamie, you're like barely a centimeter. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so she checked my cervix, and then literally contractions went from, just like breathing through them to like, oh my gosh, changing positions, trying to get in the tub. I was doing so many things trying to cope with the contractions. And so when they got to a point when I was like, okay, maybe I need to just go ahead and go to the hospital, we went on ahead to Jacksonville. Now from where I'm located, that's like an hour and some change drive. So that drive was very interesting, being in labor. But anyways, got there. When I checked in, went into the triage area, and my doctor was not on call. It just so happened that she was on call at another facility. And so in comes this other doctor. Happens to be another black woman. So I'm like, okay, great. The first thing out of her mouth was, I don't do VBACs after 2 C-sections. Excuse me? Okay. And here is where we put in our speak up, okay? I started going through a list of things, being a labor and delivery nurse. When she put me on the monitor, my baby was having some heart rate dips, and I was like, well, we haven't even done anything to correct some of those variables that I was having in my baby's heart rate. And so she kind of turned her head to the side, and she was like, I could see the wheels turning. She was trying to figure out if I worked in the medical field or what. And I was like, I'm a labor and delivery nurse. She tried to shut me down again. And she was like, well, right now you're not a labor and delivery nurse. You're a patient. 'Tis true is what I felt on the inside. And I just knew then that I was going to have to speak up for myself and really stand my ground. Now, mind you, let me just go back. I had done so much education to my husband and letting him know this is this. I even told him about heart rate, the variables and the decelerations that babies can have. I talked to him about when I'm tired, how I need you to advocate on my behalf. Like I said, he was fully educated and knew the different things that I wanted and the things that I did not want. So after I told her basically that I'm going to do a trial of labor, and it didn't matter to me whether she felt like she was going to do it or not. She wasn't the patient. I'm the patient, which means I have the say-so. So I let her know basically how it was going to go forward, and I wasn't rude. I wasn't nasty. I just made myself very clear, and I was not going to be bullied into something that I did not want. So the nurse, she kind of looked at me and was like, kudos to you. Started my IV, labor continued to progress. The baby was having some more variables after his, his heart rate had improved. And then she came in the room and she was like, oh, we're going to have to, no. What happened was he had a very big deceleration. It was like 6 minutes or so. I mean, it was deep. And honestly, and I wasn't at that point when I saw that, I was like, okay, like I'm okay with having a C-section at that point, because that's a long time. And so the nurses, and if you labor and delivery nurses who are watching this, you know that if you have a good rapport with your doctors, you kind of go ahead and get started for preparing for that C-section so that you're not wasting time. And so they had started preparing me. They had already washed my belly. They had already gave my husband his stuff to suit up. I literally was like in the middle of the room when the doctor came in, and they were like, I've already called the team. And she was like, well, I need to see the tracing. And I was like, what? This doctor was like, what? So anyways, they pushed me back to the head of the bed and plugged everything back in. And when they plugged everything back in, oh my goodness, his heart rate was beautiful. Hence enters the grace of God, okay? Because bam, I probably would have been cut with any other, hospital or something like that. But for whatever reason, she decided that she wanted to see the tracing. And because she did, it paused me from having a C-section. So again, that was certainly the grace of God. So moving forward, she was like, if this happens again, then we're going to have to cut you. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I had made peace with it. Good. So progress. The baby had another big deceleration. And she walks in the room and she's like, okay, well, we're going to have to cut you. I was like, well, can you check my cervix? Well, she checked my cervix and guess what? We were complete. I was 10 centimeters dilated. At that point, I was like, there's no way I'm going to let you cut me. I was like, we're going to push. And again, that's me speaking up. We're going to push. We're going to at least see what goes on here. And so I pulled the nurse to the side and I was like, listen, because my doctor was actually, it was time for her to come off of her rotation at the other hospital and come to the hospital where I was delivering. And so I was like, when she gets here, will she, potentially use a vacuum if necessary? If I push to, this point, will she be able to use a vacuum? She's like, yeah, absolutely. She'll use it. So I was like, okay, cool. So, my doctor walks in and I swear, my husband and I testify to this, that it was like we could hear angels because she was such an amazing doctor. When she walked in the room, peace followed her. Like, she totally was listening to what I was saying. I no longer felt this, urge and necessity to fight for myself. Like, I knew like we were all on one accord, and it was just amazing. Literally, peace walked into the room when she walked into the room. And she was like, let's have a baby. And I was like, let's have a baby. Literally like 2 or 3 pushes later, my little Joshua, who is a little feisty little something to this day, came out screaming with a head full of hair. And even though she grabbed the vacuum and like tried to put it on, she was having such trouble putting it on because his head was so full. He had so much hair. Anyway, she was like, I think that's the easiest vacuum delivery that I've ever had. And my little pumpkin pie was born. So that's my VBAC after 2 C-sections story. Now, I want to tell you about the speaking up part. I just want to hone in on that just a little bit. In each and every delivery, I always spoke up, but the way it was different with my last and my first successful VBAC, the difference was I spoke up with confidence. I spoke up knowing that I wasn't going to move unless I had a piece on the inside to move. I spoke up without feeling bullied or pressured by family or providers or any of that. I knew what I knew and nobody was going to take me away from that. The other thing was I had made a piece. My pastor actually had preached a message and he said, do the work, but trust the grace. And I had such a peace with that with my VBAC. I was like, I'm going to do everything that I know to do. I'm going to speak up. But at the end of it, God is in control. And so I released the fear of having another C-section and embraced it if it were necessary, but only if it were necessary. And that was something that I didn't do with my previous C-sections. I was so opposed to it that I didn't come to a happy medium, a middle ground. And so that peace within yourself is so important when speaking up. It enables you to speak up in a way that's not rude, but in a way that is cemented. It's stern and it's clear on what you want. I shouldn't say stern. It's clear, it's cemented, it's solid. That's the word I want to use. It's solid. And so speaking up for me with Joshua, it was solid. I was good with it. But I wasn't rude. And after my delivery, the nurses were like, I have never seen anyone speak up for themselves the way you did. And so I want to say that advocating as a nurse, that is our job. We are to advocate for ourselves. We are to advocate for our patients. But sometimes, having worked in the medical field, it's not just the nurse that the patient is having to deal with. The patient is having to deal with the nurses, the doctors, the family members. And when I say family members, I'm specifically speaking to husbands, maybe, mother-in-laws and mamas and sisters, or aunts who've gone through previous things and who are giving their advice or their admonishments, and sometimes it's not welcome. And it's hard when you're in that state to put out the things that are not welcome, but that's where speaking up is so important, and having a support person that will speak up for you. Because I have had my husband to speak up for me when I could not speak up for myself. We had to make the decision that for our later deliveries, we wouldn't have a whole bunch of people in the delivery room because of that extra emotional strain. so that we could be clear. And you know, because having a baby is a big deal. It's a spiritual matter, and so just wanted to have as much clear space as we could. So I just want to encourage everybody to speak up for yourself, whether it's in delivery, no matter what situation you find yourself in. If it's in pregnancy, if it's in life and how people are treating you, or how on your job, whatever it is, speak up. But speak up with a peace within yourself. I hope you guys were able to grab something from it, and to be encouraged to speak up. Speak up, ladies. Speak up. You have every right to advocate for yourself and stand up for yourself. So that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and again, please like, comment, subscribe, and press that notification button, y'all. Until next time, bye.